I'll have to consent. There we go. Okay, so we're ready to roll, and please, I think Kelsey, would you rather everyone wait until the end to ask questions, or should they raise their hand as we go along? What's your comfort level?
I think I'm comfortable either way. I would almost suggest if people can throw them in the chat while we kind of go through, then I can just address them as we go through. I absolutely love questions. I encourage curiosity a lot of the times. Please let me know, and yeah, I'd be more than happy to get that going for you guys.
Okay, so let's have everyone put questions into the chat as we go along, and I'll monitor the chat, Kelsey, so you don't have to get distracted. And then
Perfect. And then at the very end, I'm okay with people just chiming in. I mean, whatever that looks like, we're pretty easy today.
okay, yeah, we'll just have an open question and answer, like say the last half hour or however long it turns out to be.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll go to 5:30. Okay, let's turn it over to Kelsi and Abby.
Sounds good. Well, first and foremost, thank you all so much for having us. I love looking through here and seeing quite a few names that I know. So that's really cool. I will just talk a little bit about our firm and kind of what we do that's a little bit different. And then I think it's important to understand a lot of this is going to err on the side of my firm's beliefs. However, we are a very modernized family-owned funeral home. So a lot of the answers that you're going to get today are not only from a legal standpoint, but really just kind of across the board of what all funeral directors should be doing, kind of meeting that criteria. So please keep that in mind. If there's something specific, I will absolutely let you know how In Memoriam handles that, and again, how it probably should be handled, and we'll go from there. So my name is Kelsi Matthews. I am a graduate of Arapahoe Community College's Mortuary Science program. That was in 2008. I believe there was a question in here from Larry about what an MSP is. An MSP, the title after our names, is Mortuary Science Practitioner. And what that means is that Abby and myself have a degree in mortuary science, and we have gone on to pass the board exams, meaning the embalming portion and the arts portion of the board exams that make us have that mortuary science practitioner title. So in the event that we were to transfer to any other state, there would be some reciprocity with our MSP that we would be able to get licensure in other states, of course, barring their criteria. So that is what that means. None of you are probably new to the fact that Colorado is an unlicensed, unregulated state, so to speak. So what that means, it doesn't mean that people are bad providers. It doesn't mean that there are people out there scamming. It just means that we, the ones who have our MSPs, are very self-policing in the fact that we are well educated with continuing standards kind of across the state for us, that we're very well informed with all of the new criteria. Colorado has some of the hardest mortuary science, what do I want to say, the highest mortuary code, some of the most difficult criteria in order to meet in the whole country, I would say. And that we're just at a place where we need to make sure that our consumers are either knowing the right questions to ask their providers when it comes time, or that you're just comfortable with your provider. We think that reading Google reviews is a really clear indicator of how people are being treated at that firm. And then again, just making sure that if you are speaking to a provider and you're getting any red flags, that you're just trusting your instinct on that. You should have a funeral home that is going to be transparent with any question that you ask. And if they don't have the answer, the ability to let you know where you can find that answer. So that is something that we're very passionate about, and we believe very, very highly in. I'll let Abby introduce herself too, and then make you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Abby. I am relatively new to everything. I graduated from ACC's program in 2020, so I got right into it when COVID became a thing, so that was definitely a little bit jolting. But I have been working with Kelsi a little over a year now. I started my career in the corporate side of things, and learned a lot in a small amount of time. some good, some bad. But I'm incredibly honored to be working with her and learning. And how she says it is kind of, we're here to be a modern funeral home and, answer any and all questions that everybody has about anything. Very transparent. I know I just very much appreciate the way that she handles it.
Colorado has I should say the only accredited school here in Colorado is Arapahoe Community College through their mortuary science program. And every year we do host interns from the college and get them some real life hands-on kind of in context learning. Abby was supposed to be one of our interns here. And then of course, COVID happened and they moved the entire program online. So this will be the first year back for those students having hands-on internship experiences. And we always think that that's a really incredible opportunity. We're both preceptors now, which is really incredible. So we're able to take on a lot of those students and make sure that they can, again, learn hands-on. Preceptor would need to be graduated from the program itself, and so that we can take on students and make sure that they're learning all of the things that they need to know. And there's a certain amount of criteria for different services that they do need to meet. So certain things like they have to do 3 veteran services, they have to do 3 non-traditional Christian services, they have to attend 2 gravesides. I mean, all of these different things that kind of make this big picture of what it is that we do. And I'll go into it in just a minute, kind of the day in the life, so to speak, and what it is, what we do. But hopefully that answers your question about mortuary science practitioners. Again, doesn't mean anything. We do have titular protection here in Colorado, meaning that not just anybody can call themselves a mortuary science practitioner. However, and unfortunately, anybody can call themselves a funeral director. And that is something that I feel is just comes with consumer education, and just something that, you got to be asking the questions and ensuring that your comfort level is matching the firm that you've chosen. Sometimes when people haven't planned for this and all of a sudden there's a death and you're going through the rigmarole of trying to figure out what to do, you're making all of these decisions under duress very quickly. And our whole goal is to be there to support you, not to make you feel like you have a whole slew of other things that you have to decide as well. So again, that is the role of a funeral director in the modern sense. In Memoriam, we're located here in Broomfield. We do have our crematory here on site at the funeral home. That to us is a huge commodity. Just the ability to have somebody's loved one here on site and stay in our care is something that we've really strived for, especially now that we all have our own aging family, and we've unfortunately and very much with privilege have been able to care for some of our very own family here. And I think that that is one thing that really sets us apart from other firms. So again, consumer wise, you can ask, is your crematory on site? If that's something that's important to you. To some people, it's absolutely important. To some people, it's not important. And I think that that's okay. But I do know that having the ability to ask that question would be very important. If a crematory is not on site at the funeral home, there's 2 scenarios. One, that they can have kind of a generalized care facility where everyone goes, and that location serves multiple locations across the Front Range. Or there's a third-party crematory that becomes involved, where the patient, or I'm sorry, in this particular instance, we'll say family member, where the family member's body can be transported to that crematory and then back to the funeral home for the family to pick up after, when the cremated remains are ready to go. So again, if it offers you a little bit of peace of mind, I do think that that's an important question to be asking. Where is my loved one? Where is my loved one going right now? Where is the crematory? Those sorts of things are very important. For us, we are more than a cremation facility. We are a full service funeral provider. We are well versed anywhere from natural funerals to whatever that may be. I know that that's very subjective to certain families, but natural funerals meaning no embalming, or maybe there's no casket, there's maybe a body that gets placed directly into a shroud into the ground. Those are all things that we can absolutely honor, all the way up to full traditional. So we're talking Catholic service with a burial. Those are kind of that's the whole gamut of what we have. In Memoriam is part of the National Home Funeral Alliance, and we do help families that want to have home funerals with that certain ceremony, if that's something that they'd want to do. We work very closely with a lot of the death doulas that are within the same network, and just happy to make that happen for a family if that's what's going to resonate with them a little bit more. We are an old 1950s farmhouse, so we already have a little bit of a home feel to us. So families that maybe are on the fence about that, or just want something a little bit more personalized, are of course welcome to have a service here, or a dressing ceremony here. I mean, we do family-led dressings all the time. Families will say, is it okay if I come in and get my wife ready? Or is it okay if I come in and get my daughter ready? And we tell them, absolutely, it's your person. We're here to assist you with that. I think that that's a very important indication through this whole process, whether it's planning for ourselves or planning for someone that we know we're going to lose. In the end, it is still your person. Your funeral home is just there to guide you through all of that. That being said, again, there's not going to be notes or any quizzes or anything, so I'll just rattle on some of these topics that I wanted to touch base on. I know you're all pretty well versed on different types of disposition, and I won't go too much into all of the different alternatives. But in the state of Colorado, there are 7 types of disposition. I always think it's important to kind of touch on those. Of course, cremation in Memoriam sits at about 75. I argue with my QuickBooks. Our QuickBooks says we're about 75% cremation. I dare say we're closer to 80-90% cremation rate here again at my firm. And so we have cremation, we have burial. There's going to be entombment. So entombment would be if the body itself is placed in a casket into a big mausoleum wall. Kind of some of the larger cemeteries offer that. Whole body donation. I'm sure you've all heard of whole body donation, certain entities that take care of that. There's also what we call removal from state. So let's say we're taking care of grandma, and grandma had died here in Denver, but she has a plot out in Kansas. We call that removal from state. We're going to be preparing her body in a way that we can send her out to Kansas. Newer to this group of all the dispositions are going to be alkaline hydrolysis, which is now legal in quite a few states. And that's also known as water cremation. You'll hear us talk about that a little bit. And then most new to this disposition list would be natural organic reduction or under body composting. So those are kind of the ones that we talk about. Those are the 7 types of disposition here in Colorado that have become legal. And I will say I'm very proud of Colorado to be able to offer all of that as options, and In Memoriam is proud to offer those as well. Let me I'll type in the chat here in just a moment with our information, but we always feel like we want to be a resource to people, regardless if we're their provider. I've been very fortunate to sit on the advisory board for Arapahoe Community College, so making sure that I stay kind of abreast with everything that the students are learning, what that curriculum is going to look like, how we can do things better, and so on and so forth. And I also run a chapter of about 75 local funeral directors with the Denver Metro Funeral Directors Association, just again making sure that we're all up to par with our newest Fort Logan rules, for example, or how the military now does it. And that's a very important thing for our funeral directors to just kind of stay in the know about and go from there. Oh, I feel like this is so boring. Is this boring? I don't want it to be boring. A day in the life. I'll give you a day in the life. I think Abby and I both wear quite a few hats in this industry. Now, again, I'm speaking really only with our firm. A lot of corporate industry or corporate places, for example, you might be a funeral director and that's your only role, meaning you're sitting with families, you're meeting with families all day. That is your only role. You might be a service director where you're only out on funerals all day and doing funerals is your only role. You might be an embalmer and embalming is your only role all day, every day. I am kind of speaking for Abby as well, but I think having the privilege to be all of these different roles is something that we hold very, very much in high regards. And it's really a gratifying process to take the very first phone call from a family who's confused about what the heck to do, get them started, meet their loved one, care for the body, care for the family, have this little marriage of how it all kind of comes together, and have that family understand that we are the ones from start to finish that get to care for them. We get to do flower arrangements, and
Yes, I've gotten very good at that.
Abby's our in-house floral designer. We get to do printing material. We get to do all of the designs for that. We get to be janitors sometimes. We get to, gosh, I mean, we just kind of have all these multifaceted skills that really come into play. I mean, talk about creativity and the ability to sit and listen with the family and pick up on these little nuances. You know, every now and then there might be something that resonates with me if a family says, you know, oh gosh, I mean, this is a true story. One of our decedents that we cared for loved Mountain Dew and was unfortunately in a position where he was not viewable to his family. Of course, we give reasons why, but in this particular instance, he was of the larger size and had been in an extensively hot apartment for an extended period of time. And we were unable to give the family what they were truly looking for in terms of viewing. And we have to be upfront and honest about all of that, and, you know, tell them the reasons why or why not. We think that that's a good idea. We cannot keep somebody from doing anything, but we can guide them. And in this particular instance, the family chose to come sit with their loved one in his closed cremation container. And we had walked into King Soopers that day, and they just on a whim had, you know, Mountain Dew colored peonies
Carnations.
what were they?
I don't remember.
Mums. They were
Mums.
mums.
Yeah.
And we did this beautiful little hand bouquet of just Mountain Dew colored flowers on top of this container. And it made the world of difference for this family to walk in and hear us, or have us listen to their person's story and what was important to him. And those are the little details that I think really set providers apart in terms of just that human element. You know, this is the one thing that ties us all together. And how can we make it a little bit more special for a family that's just going through the worst thing that they'll ever go through?
Kelsi, can I step in and just say that I had no idea how many hats you wore. I mean, I knew that you took care of families from when they walked in the door through the entire process, including a memorial service if they'd like you to help out. And Funeral Consumer Society definitely supports family-run organizations. Can you compare and contrast a little bit with the corporate-run funeral homes? I know you've worked for a corporate funeral home in the past. It's just a different mindset, it's a different structure, it's a different business model. Could you address that a little bit?
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
In my personal experience, I actually only stayed in my position a little less than a year. It didn't coincide with my beliefs, I guess. Not that anything was negative, but I definitely can see a difference between both the corporate side and how she runs her business. The way it worked for where I was at is I was considered just a service director. So at almost every service that I was on, I hadn't even interacted with the family up until the day of the service. So my specific role was to just be there day of the service. Somebody hands me a folder and says, this is who you're working with, go for it. Whereas like with what we do here, we meet with the family, we're there every single step of the way, and we're not passing them along to multiple phases, which I think is kind of shocking for them to just have too many people that they're communicating with. And I experienced that on my side where I would show up and they're like, who are you? And I think that's a little shocking day of to not see who you met with that day. So there was like arranging directors, and all they would do every day is just sit in front of a family and meet one after the other, and then not even be there for the service. And I think that totally kind of removes you from the situation, and it doesn't feel as human as she had mentioned. It felt very monotonous, and it got to a point where it was not how I wanted to continue.
Most of the time, sorry, I'll just interject really quickly. You know, it's difficult when you're working with a funeral firm and you see a name that's on a facility, and you know, it sounds like a family name. I mean, it really isn't until you get an email address from one of your providers that you would really be able to tell if they belong to a different corporation. So you can certainly ask, again, as a consumer, you know, are you part of a larger firm, or what corporation is this funeral home part of? We really think that I mean, I was trying to name at least 10 family ran funeral homes in the metro area, and I think I come up right about 10, to be completely honest, of some of the larger firms anyway. And again, it's not to say that corporate places are not good and that they don't serve a purpose. They absolutely do. I just don't ever want a consumer to feel like, hey, I've made this decision, I don't feel comfortable with it, and now I have to stick with it. I mean, you as a consumer have the right to decide, you know, hey, I think I do want a different provider. And you know, again, just looking for that personal aspect. And you know, at any given time, just so you guys have the knowledge, we serve about 35 families a month here in Memoriam. And our whole goal is to make the family that we're working with feel like the only family that's going through this, as they should. That's absolutely how they should feel. And so if your funeral director isn't doing that, they're not taking well enough care of their families.
Related?
There are absolutely days, I say this with a little hesitancy, because even yesterday we took on 5 new families and it was a tad overwhelming. But there comes a day and time where you have to really step back from our role, even with what we do, and go, okay, what does this family need? Maybe this is why they're being a little bit more intense, or, you know, maybe they're not jiving with my personality super well, and I'll hand them off to Abby, and vice versa. And so we try to find that dynamic of how we can best support that family and meet them in that grief of where they are, because sometimes it's just seeing it from a totally different perspective that's helpful. Let's see.
We are
here.
24 hours too, whereas like where I was working, it was just an answering service after hours. So people would call with questions, and then they would get the response, oh, we'll pass that on and you'll get a response later. Whereas like we're answering the phone all day, every day. And if I don't know the answer, I can have it within 5 minutes. So it works a lot better in that regard, I'd say. Just being able to meet the family where they need, exactly when they need it, is from my experience, a lot better.
I do think hanging onto our phones and having, you know, the ability. Now we don't love to answer like non-urgent questions 24/7, but of course, if a family is up against a death that's unexpected and they have an educated funeral director on the other line, I mean, how great to know that your questions can be answered right away, or we can tell the family. I mean, I have no qualms with telling a family, hey, let's take a deep breath and step back for a second. There's nothing else we can do at the moment. Like, let's take this moment for what it is, and we'll get you through this just one step at a time. And then there's other families that, you know, want to have that time and they want to be paced, and we're glad to kind of walk with them through that process and say, you know, you're absolutely right. I know that death occurred. You sit with your person for a few hours and you call us when you're ready. And I think that is a huge, maybe the last year working with hospice teams so closely that I've had, that I do wish our hospice nurses, I know our doulas do a great job of doing it, our death doulas, but reminding families that once the death has occurred, it's okay to take a few minutes. That person's not going to go anywhere. And sometimes it takes us the death to happen to be able to really stay present in that moment and go, you're right. The world can just stop for the next hour and that's okay. And so we're always trying to remind our families, especially the ones that turn frantic and go, oh my gosh, you need to come pick up mom right away. You know, what is it that's making them so frantic about that situation? You know, let's take a minute and let's go through this, and our team will be there in just a few hours after the death. I mean, truly. And I think that that's something important to kind of keep in mind. So just taking a moment, staying present through the whole thing, especially when you're planning for someone's death or you have a loved one that's imminent, just taking that time. Dawn Opeka, hi Dawn, tell us why you chose this career. So for me, I mean, our stories are
Pretty
quite
similar.
different. Oh, I was just
You were
thinking
gonna
they're
say
so
different? I feel like they're pretty similar.
Okay, well, we're also 10 years apart, so we won't go there. But when I graduated high school, crime scene investigation was very important. Very important in my life. CSI, you remember the TV show? I loved it. I wanted to be a pathologist so bad. And I ended up going to a 3-week crime scene intensive over at Georgetown University. I have no idea how I found it. The internet wasn't, I mean, it was around, but not like you could find events super easily. And saw that there was a mortuary school in Colorado and thought, well, you know, maybe I'll start there instead of a full pathology degree, and ended up writing to college and got into the program, and the rest was kind of
That's it.
history. I mean, I didn't have anybody in my family that had done this before. My whole family are athletes and I have not one athletic bone in my body. So of course I became a mortician, and again, worked for a family-owned firm. I absolutely adored it. That was really my main mentor and where I kind of learned how I wanted to run everything. And from one day to the next, the family-owned firm was picked up by a corporation and things were just not the same. From that point, I went into organ procurement. So I worked for Donor Alliance, which is a whole other fascinating career kind of in and of itself. But I knew that ultimately my heart was in funeral directing. And my husband and I, who's not here tonight, I'm sorry, but my husband and I started in Memoriam a little bit more than 5 years ago. So we just celebrated 5 years in October, kind of after we saw that the community just needed a little bit of variation with their funeral providers. So we were happy to offer that to everybody. But I'll let Abby tell why she got into this.
Yeah, I would say it's generally similar. I didn't do any sort of organ procurement or anything. But I got into it mostly kind of seeing the pathology side of things, and I actually wanted to be a pathologist as well. But I couldn't go to school for that long, just
We're busybodies, if you can't tell.
Yeah, I needed to be working. I've been in the service industry since I was about 16 years old. I've just been doing that. So I knew I wanted to be somewhere in the service side of things. And just being on social media and just researching all about it, I came across the funeral side of things. And I specifically kind of got into it more so to be on the back of things, where I was very interested in the restorative art part of what we do, with the makeup and getting people ready for a viewing, whatever that looks like, whether that's extensive or just even just simple makeup. But I found myself leaning towards that kind of stuff. But as I got into school and I started learning that there's so many aspects of the funeral industry itself, I just started learning that I loved every single part of it. So that's what made it hard, I think, with my last position, where it was just the same thing every single day. Whereas what I saw for myself truly working is just having all those hats on, just being able to do every single thing from the get-go to the end. And I think it works very well. So that's kind of what I went into.
I feel very, very fortunate that it kind of caught Abby when she was, I mean, I think burnt out is a good way to put it in the corporate world. I mean, we have our burnout days here, but we've also learned that when it's quiet, we need to take time for ourselves. But that being said, Abby had come one year just to kind of help us with some little odds and ends things, and was actually looking back at going into a career that was far from funeral service. And it worked out in a way that we were able to offer her something, and she came back into it. And oh my gosh, she's just been an absolute dream to work with for our families, dream to work with as an employee. So we're grateful. And I mean, every single thing about this job, we learn something new every day, whether it's different family dynamics or a question that we may not have ever run into before. We are on our toes all the time. And I do think that that's really good. Just the second that we've lost the spark for this, we know we need to not be in this industry anymore. I'll address some of these questions that are in here, if that's okay, Sue.
I want to first say that,
Yeah.
well, thank goodness there are people like you who are willing to take on a career that involves a 24/7 availability to help people when they're at their time of most need. And it's something I can't even imagine taking on. So, which is
It's
huge.
just so much more than a job. I mean, it's a lifestyle, to be completely honest. I mean, we all rely on each other. We're all very, we're all cross-trained on everything, so we can all do each other's jobs, so to speak. Except for I joke that my husband's the accountant and I'm the embalmer. So that's about the only two things that we don't cross on. But other than that, it really is. It's just nice having 3 different individuals that work with us that we can always kind of do each other's jobs. And again, it's a lifestyle. We eat, breathe, and live this. And it becomes draining. Vacations are very difficult. But with Abby on our team, we've really learned to try and balance that out. But yes, there's a lot of firms that have people like us. Absolutely. What happens if no one comes to pick up a person's ashes or bodies? What's done with the remains? So in terms of cremation, our cremation authorization clause does state that the remains have to be picked up within 3 years or they are scattered. It might be unfortunately shocking to know how many urns we actually do have on site here. People always tell me, like, I can't imagine somebody wouldn't come back for somebody. Unfortunately, it happens a lot. So we have put in our cremation clause that 3 years gone unclaimed, that we will scatter them at our discretion. If somebody doesn't claim a body, for example, we bring somebody into our care and we can't get a hold of the family, or all of a sudden they decide that they want to just be elusive for whatever reason. Luckily, I'm going to knock on wood, this has not happened to us. However, I have threatened a couple times that if 10 days goes by and this person is unclaimed, I now need to turn that body over to the county coroner's office and they become property of the state, meaning the state will then decide their disposition. The state will put them on a county coroner rotation list for those funeral homes to care for individuals who have gone unclaimed. And that is a really big eye opener for some of these families that either drag their feet. And it's not to say that they're bad people, but usually it's a characteristic that they've probably had their whole life. It's not just grief oriented. So again, that being said, we would usually call the county coroner's office and have them come retrieve the remains, and then have that person unfortunately go on a county coroner rotation list.
Kelsi, the Woods have had their hand up for a while.
I think that must be on the second screen. I don't see
Yeah,
anything.
it's 2 screens. It's hard to see.
Oh yeah, please.
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the information you provided. It's excellent.
Yes.
I have a brief question. My wife and I are both 75. We don't have any immediate illness that is terminal. But what we would like to do is to have a situation where when we pass, our children would have all the information they need to call somebody and start the process of cremation, which is our choice. Also, we're Buddhists and we leave the body for 3 days on ice. And so the 2 questions I have are, one, can you help with that process of procuring the ice and putting the ice if we choose to stay at home, or sometimes we do it in a shrine room? And the other question is, can we meet with you to have some kind of arrangement that when we die, they can immediately contact you and have a process started?
Absolutely, Mr. Wood. So up on our website, and I'll have Sue share our website. We do have a little pre-arranged form that's really simple to fill out. You can go in and you can put as much information as you're comfortable with. You certainly don't have to. That is one way to do it. You can put that in there. There's a little special section on notes where you could absolutely add your, some of the customs and beliefs that we would need to abide by when the time comes. And to answer, would we meet in person? Absolutely. There's nothing I love more than sitting down with families and making sure that their plans are in place. We try to really tell families, have close family members know what your wishes are, and have them know who to call and what to do, and really safeguard that information. I mean, again, I know Sue can back me up on how important it is to have just the closest people in your life know exactly what to do when the time comes.
They know exactly what we want. The issue is for when we die, that they have simply a name and a phone number in a folder that Sue helped us prepare, that they can call you and immediately start the process, and they don't have to start by figuring out who's going to handle the bodies, how is the ice going to be procured, and et cetera, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And absolutely, we've done that before. We have like a home care item, and I'll talk about this here in just a moment, but a home care item where we can actually come to the house and help assist in preparing the body to stay at home for however long it needs to stay at home. Okay. So absolutely, we can do all of that there, Mr. Wood.
So I will start by looking for your form and completing it. And then you tell us if it is necessary to meet in person or we don't need to.
Sure. I mean, I would say that that's completely up to you all. Sometimes that online form suffices. We acknowledge receipt of every single form that does come through. If it makes you more comfortable, please know, absolutely, I'd be more than happy to come to your home. You're welcome to come to the facility if that makes you comfortable and you can see the place, and absolutely put that in line so that when the time comes, your family just has to call one phone number and everything's in place.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for being available to do this.
Absolutely.
I imagine you are incredibly busy given the number of families that you help a month. So to take the time to do this is wonderful of you both. Thank you.
Thank you. We love it. We really do.
Well, for organizing it.
Yes, no, this is a huge honor to be invited to do this. So thank you all for your time as well. Let's see, to Kelsi, we got that. Hopefully that answers the question. Sign up in advance. Again, we do have a form up on our website that you're welcome to do. If you're more comfortable to call me and have a conversation in person or over the phone, of course, we're happy to help with that. I am a licensed pre-need agent here in Colorado. So depending on what somebody's needs or situation may be, sometime up against Medicaid spend downs and you need to liquidate those assets, we can put those funds into a funeral policy, but by no means do you have to prepay for any of the services. It's just something that is up to you guys as an individual. So please know that much. Lauren Metzel is asking, can anyone start a funeral home or cemetery? I mean, and all technicalities, yes, you could. Somebody could start a funeral home or cemetery. That's why, again, I'm here talking to you guys. Make sure you know who you're working with. If it's important for them to have brick and mortar, please ask them. Just unfortunately, there's a couple people out there that are acting as brokers, and they may never actually see the decedent, and that gets to be a little unnerving. But if you're asking the right questions, or if you want to just say like, hey, can I come see your facility? If there's any hesitancy or any red flags with that, just take that for what it's worth. Of course, there's zoning restrictions. We're roughly 120th and we're between Sheridan and Wadsworth on 120th. And, the reason that we're here is because that's where the city told me that I could be. So that's not my choice. But again, yeah, so long as you're following rules and statutes and all of that, essentially anybody could open a funeral home or cemetery.
Just a lot of research.
A lot of
laws.
research. I learned more about BTUs and city zoning than I ever wanted to learn. Oh, while I was pregnant, as Sue mentioned, for whatever reason, we decided to have a second baby while we were starting all of this. And so my first, 6 months here at this facility were me with my son, actually named Antonio, strapped to my chest, and we would do services. And, it really kind of made people see that we really are real families taking care of real families. And I absolutely love that. How long can a body stay at home before someone has to be called? How long can the body be kept on ice or in the home? So in the state of Colorado, there are two types of death that we kind of categorize. Attended deaths and then unattended deaths. So an attended death would be considered home hospice, or somebody dies at a hospital or a nursing center or something like that. There's nurses, there's people in attendance to the body where we're knowing what's going on. Unattended death means, you weren't expecting your spouse to die in the middle of the night while they were sleeping, and that's an unattended death. Car accident, unattended death, those types of trauma, unattended. We always encourage our families, of course, call 911 if that happens. In the event of attended deaths, so long as the notification call has been made to either the funeral home or the family, then we can kind of help dictate how long the body can stay at the house. I try very hard to keep it with under 3 days. I would say at about the 3-day maximum, without total refrigeration, the body does start to change quite drastically. We do have precautions, as the Woods mentioned, we have ice, we have the ability to ice at home. What the Colorado statute says is that within 24 hours of the death, the body needs to be cremated, buried, or refrigerated. So we're going to hone in real hard on that refrigerated side and say that ice will absolutely suffice. Of course, refrigeration would suffice. And of course, it's the family's prerogative. If they want to keep their person at home for a few days, absolutely, you can do that. Again, how long can the body be kept on ice in the home? 3 days is really my personal comfort level maximum. I would almost even say 2, but of course, different cultural exceptions will make that call no matter.
Kelsi, this comes up not infrequently in groups. People are ask, if say their spouse doesn't wake up in the morning, can they fudge it a little bit? Can they slow things down and wait to call the coroner? And I'm not asking for a legal perspective here, but just on a practical level, it feels to me like you could easily say, I just found him now, several hours later or whatever, because of wanting to slow things down, which I so appreciate about your approach, because I attended something from another funeral home a few years ago, and they said, oh my God, the body has to be picked up right away. It'll start to deteriorate, and we need to, within an hour, we need to get it out of the house or the nursing home or whatever, which I know is not true. And I'm a strong believer of slowing things down. The worst has already happened. Take your time, spend time with the body, let the reality of the situation be absorbed and embodied, and just be able to slow things down.
Sure. Just to kind of CYA myself here a little bit, I would say that no matter what, let's use the scenario of you do find your spouse unfortunately asleep. They didn't wake up. I would encourage our families to immediately call 911. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of frantic, just kind of as you go through the motions. A lot of times, if it's very apparent and you're in a calm situation yourself and you're saying to 911, hey, my spouse wasn't doing super well, but we know that the death occurred. They will send an ambulance out without sirens. So please know it's not like a frantic 911. We're going to try to resuscitate. It is truly just them coming out to do a pronouncement. Most of the time in those unattended death cases, there will be a call made to a coroner or an investigator, and it's not uncommon practice for that investigator to come to the home, look at the situation, because of course they're just making sure that there's nothing funky going on. And at that point, the investigator will ask the family, have you chosen a funeral home? That would be my preference at that moment, to take the time that you need with your person and say, you know, hey, the funeral home has been notified, but they know that they can come tonight after we all have dinner and figure out what's going on. It does not have to be hurry up and get the body out of here. Now, on the contrary, maybe it's not as peaceful as it's made out to be, or perhaps somebody's on the floor and that's a really uncomfortable situation to be in, to find someone you love in that particular situation. Our role as a funeral home then is to tell them, come in and spend time with them here. Let's get them cleaned up in a manner that's very dignified and peaceful, and you can come in and spend time with them here. Because God knows, seeing your person on the floor or had bonked their head or fell in the shower or something, that is not a peaceful situation to have that time with your person. So there are so many variables that I think trusting your gut and knowing, no matter what funeral home you've chosen, somebody's not going to just pick up your person and put them in the crematory. Please know that. There is a series of legal events that we have to do in order to get permitting, authorizations, in order to move forward with whatever disposition. And at that point, again, we can take the time to slow down, to take in the moments, and have people come in and spend time with their loved one at whatever capacity that looks like. I do think that recently received an extraordinary expense related to an ambulance ride. So the pronouncement should not cost anything. It's the decedent themselves would not be transported in an ambulance anywhere at that point. After the death occurs, and if somebody is at the house, the funeral home would be notified, and we would be the ones to pick that person up and bring them back into our care. At no point should a deceased body be transported in an ambulance. Ambulances are reserved absolutely for living people who need it. Once a death occurs, again, it can slow down. It can absolutely slow down. And your prerogative as the family is to tell that investigator, hey, we want to slow things down. Or have an advocate, have someone at your home saying, you know, no different than a doula. I mean, truthfully, maybe you call a death doula and maybe you have them there and just say like, hey, they're going to be our liaison, and tell everyone to slow down because this is too much right now. Ooh, best part of my job and the worst part. You want to answer that?
Oh gosh. I think the best part of my job is that I look forward to it every single day. As much as it can get hard, I truthfully really just honor my position and honor my role. And just getting to see people at their worst and being able to provide some sort of comfort, whatever they need, is really like a life purpose for me, I'd say. So that's probably the best part of my job is just that I love it so much. I'd say the worst part, I think
We get hungry a lot.
we do get hungry a lot. And just trying to find the time to eat is sometimes a little difficult, but we make it work. So sometimes families are just a little bit harder to meet them where they need to be met. Just, you know, every single human being is completely different in the way that they perceive the world and how they need to be helped. And sometimes it can get hard, but I truly appreciate that aspect as well, just because it helps me know how to face situations in the future. And just like she said, we're always learning every single day. So it's helpful in that regard. I guess that's not a worse part because I just made it positive.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, I'm happy to again address kind of some of the difficult conversations to discuss. I mean, the worst part of our job sometimes is sitting here with a family who's lost a child, or sitting with a family who's lost a baby, or sitting with a family that was in an extremely traumatic situation. And I get to tell them, I understand that the worst place in the world to be right now is at my table. And just acknowledging the fact that the situation that we're in is super shitty and there's just no way around it.
Yeah, I think cases too that strike a chord in your own experience in your own life definitely is hard. Oftentimes we kind of just go through the motions, and then we get something that truly I wouldn't say triggers, but things come up and you have to learn how to separate yourself from that. Yeah,
Lots of boundary setting.
yeah.
And we kind of learned the hard way with some families that we needed to have stricter boundaries, for example, or maybe we needed to approach that differently with them. And as Abby said, it's just a learning curve with every single family. You don't know how they're going to react, especially grief. It exacerbates a lot of emotions, a lot of different things that people are going through, and that's really tough. But at the end of the day, we are the ones, and I truly mean it, when we are the ones privileged with the difficult task of trying to get them through that.
Kelsi and Abby, could you speak to your experience working with families where no planning has occurred? And I know that you have to you have to be group counselors and such, and trying to navigate a family coming in and not being in agreement as to how the arrangements should be made for someone because nothing was communicated up front about what the person would have wanted. What is that like for you guys?
I think dynamics can be a tricky situation to move around. The positive thing I'd say in that regard is that there are specific laws in place that at the end of the day, one or a few people, however it works out, have the specific authority over everything. So at the end of the day, like the way it's set up is, typically it'll be the spouse. So the spouse at the end of the day has complete authority over what happens. So, a family member can call in and say all that they want, but at the end of the day, it's the spouse that makes the decision. If there's no plans in place, we try to just get an idea of what makes them the most comfortable. Really, it's about getting the family through the death. And so if there's not any specific plans or what somebody said that they want before they pass, it's really just listening to the next of kin and what will get them through it and what makes them comfortable.
Exactly. Making educated suggestions based on what this family is looking for. But we're huge proponents of people talking about it. I mean, oh my gosh, the amounts of times that I tell people, like, at the very least, tell somebody what you want done. Like, hey, I want to be cremated, and then, never breach the subject again. Great. At least you got that part out of the way. But we notice a humongous difference in families that come in here frantic, had no idea what dad's wishes were, versus the ones that have pre-planned, or at the very least knew. I'm shocked because right now some of the people that I sit down and pre-plan with, let's say they're mid 60s to mid 70s, their children are the ones that don't want to talk about it. And I think that is absolutely fascinating, because I'm thinking, why? This is the one surefire thing that none of us are gonna outsmart. So why aren't we having better conversations about it? Does this person with medical power of attorney get involved? How about the executor? So that's a great question, Mr. Sargent. Thank you. So with with a medical power of attorney, any type of POA is going to cease for that individual at time of death. So we always feel real bad when we have to break the news that unfortunately this person that's been in charge is no longer in charge of this body, this decedent. You know, and again, we have the hard task of saying that, I'm so sorry, regardless of your family dynamics, here's the situation. Mortuary law states that, you know, these are going to be the next of kin. In the terms of medical POA, and NPOA can absolutely do a pre-planned funeral plan, for example. They can absolutely come in and talk to me and discuss and put plans in action, but they cannot decide disposition for that individual. Now, that being said, Colorado is a first person consent state. So if you put in writing and you notarize that, or you have it in your will, I want to be cremated, Colorado recognizes that as consent. That is a first person consent. You are consenting to this. In the event that you do have a will, that executorship now trumps any other next of kin. So as Abby's saying, you know, we get situations where we might have mom who died, mom has 9 kids. Well, now we got to get 9 people on the same page, almost quite literally. And in the state of Colorado, what we follow, especially at my firm, but what the law says is that you need majority next of kin signatures to line up on that. So if 5 of 9 kids agree on cremation and that's what they want to do, that's what we then pursue. Now, in the example where there's 9 children, but one of the children's an executor, we only have to go to that one child as the executor or as that personal rep. And that's covered under the statute. So we do that. So again, MPOA can do all the pre-planning in the world. They can do all of the medical decisions. As soon as that death occurs, unfortunately, MPOA has no legal standing in Colorado.
Okay, and I'll just jump in to say, if you do address your wishes in a will, a legal will, make sure that that will is available at the time of your death, because so often a will is stashed in a safety deposit box or a safe or something.
Or a
And-
lockbox. Don't do it in a lockbox.
Yeah, so it's not accessible, and nobody knows it's even there. A lot of times people don't even know it's there. Maybe the medical power of attorney, you know, all the advanced directives have been available all along, but at least photocopy that will and make it available to the people who are taking care of you at the end of your life, so that they know. Otherwise everything is going to happen the way it happens, and then they'll find out afterwards how it should have happened.
Yeah.
So.
I got a direct message here. I have a prepaid cremation plan associated with a local funeral home. What happens if that funeral home closes before I pass? So if you do have a prepaid funeral plan, I encourage you to check in on it, call the firm, make sure that it's in good standing, make sure it looks the way that it needs to look for you, and ask that firm, what happens if you close before I die? Majority of the time, and of course I am speaking for myself as an agent, our firm is in Memoriam, but most of the time those policies are transferable, and that is not an issue at all. So let's say you have a plan with somebody and you decide that you want to transfer it to in memoriam, fantastic. We'll take a look at it. We'll make sure that everything's enforced so that we can honor that. In the event my clients who have prepaid funeral policies with in memoriam goes out of business, which we won't, but just in case we do, what we would do is find another firm that would essentially absorb those funeral plans for us and honor those policies for the individuals that have it taken out. Now, there's 2 types of prepaid funeral plans in Colorado. One is going to be trust funded, meaning you're writing the check to that firm and you're hoping that they're going to hold on to your money for forever. The second one is insurance funded. In Memoriam is an insurance funded pre-need agency, meaning I utilize a company called Homesteaders that is a third party that holds on to my customers' prepaid funeral money. It grows interest on the back end. So we guarantee whatever price today is, that will stay the price in however many years from now for our consumers. And on the contrary, that if our family gets a wild hair and moves to Florida, they now have those monies to use in Florida at whatever firm they choose. Now, the prices are, of course, going to be written at the level of the firm that you chose. So maybe you have a $1,400 funeral pre-planned somewhere else, and our direct cremation price is $1,675. Your family will owe the difference of that $375. But that's not to say that we can't use those funds towards any other funeral expenses. And again, it should be transferable to no matter what. But I do encourage you that if you have a prepaid funeral policy, just call in and check on it every now and then, make sure it's in force and make sure it's in good standing.
Yeah, great advice.
Whew.
Hey, other questions?
Can cemeteries go out of business? Ooh, I don't know. It's never happened in my lifetime. However, yeah, they can fill up. Can they go out of business? That's a great question, and I don't truly have the answer to that. I have not bore witness to that in my lifetime. We almost saw it happen with Fort Logan, as a matter of fact, where their last burial was going to be in like 2026, but they just bought 72 acres more, and we just found out that the very last burial will be in 2063, so I'll be well dead by then, hopefully, and I won't have to worry about that. But it's interesting because sometimes cemeteries can do expansions in terms of, okay, maybe they ran out of space for bodies, for casketed bodies, but maybe they build a mausoleum and they keep it going with columbariums, for example. Maybe they have urn spaces. I think that that's probably a very unlikely scenario. I mean, that'd be really bad karma to buy some cemetery land and close it down. I feel.
And
I think they put in place too, like I'm speaking on just like thinking about this, but like it's specific to like cemeteries have to set up and say like, we're gonna be here forever, like that. There's zoning to ensure that it doesn't get,
Usually they'd be historic or anything at that point.
yeah.
For folks outside of Front Range, absolutely. So in Memoriam in particular, our radius is 50 miles without paying anything additional for transport, but we serve all of Colorado. I mean, all of metro area. That's something that's very important to us. And we would never put a demographic restriction on anybody that's, outside of Colorado. Now, if somebody was outside of Colorado, this is a true story. I had a dear friend who wanted me to take care of somebody who died in Wyoming. We did all the permitting and we brought the body down from Wyoming and actually did the cremation here. So there are ways around different things. Just depends again on permitting and us getting the legal requirements that we need in order to take care of somebody. But if they were within Colorado, we can absolutely provide whatever services that person's looking for.
Kelsi,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to touch again on kind of the curious side and be a little bit blunt about it. But, the other side of all of this is trying to address too, that again, some of these providers that are out there saying that they're funeral directors, might be addressing a demographic where we do think that the death is going to be natural and beautiful and easy, and death is not that a lot of times. Sometimes death is highly traumatic. Sometimes people have weeks in the hospital. Sometimes people are dismembered. Sometimes people have autopsies. I mean, it's just the nature of, unfortunately, what we do. And our abilities as MSPs, as mortuary science practitioners, mean that we have the hands-on training to get that restorative art process kind of in place, meaning we're going to let a family know, hey, this is a situation where embalming might be important for your family, so that we can do the work that we need to in order to get your person looking the way that you remembered them. I think more often than not, there's a little bit of a romanticized version of kind of what we do. And I think it's important for us to really address that sometimes it can be super nitty gritty. And that we do need to do some extensive restoration on somebody's loved one in order to get them a peaceful viewing. I don't exactly know where I was going with it, but I get a little perturbed just in terms of not all death is peaceful. Can it be? 100%. But working again with a provider that can address sometimes when death is just anything but pretty, I think is very important.
Yeah. Kelsi, can you speak to witness cremations? Because with having the crematory right on premises, I think helps families have that option, does it not?
Absolutely. I mean, I was very fortunate when I was starting in Memoriam. One of my pastors, who is a very dear friend of mine, he actually told me he would never work with a corporate funeral home. So he works very closely with his parishioners to ensure that they are, again, making educated decisions when it comes to their funeral provider. He told me, when you build this crematory, make it nice, make it aesthetic, make it something that we can be back here. Because, for example, we'll have Buddhist families that want to be part of that ceremony of putting their loved one into the crematory. Him as a pastor, he comes in and he does a prayer for every single one of his parishioners, almost like a committal service, a committal of the body to the crematory before every single cremation for his parish. And what we've found is putting it on the cremation authorization sparks that conversation that wouldn't otherwise happen. So we live in a world of, hey, dad just wanted to be cremated. He said, don't do anything for him. Well, that's really cool for dad, but what about us? What about the ones of us that need that bit of ceremony? The witness cremation provides a ceremony, a very tactile way for that family to stay involved at whatever capacity that they want, their comfort level, their involvement, of taking their person down to the crematory, placing them into the machine if they'd like, pressing the buttons if they'd like, and just offering a sense of closure for that moment, that very moment, because that's all we can do is moment by moment. But I think having the ability to offer that to our families has been just phenomenal. I mean, it turned out to be something that inadvertently turned into our bread and butter. I mean, we probably do one witness cremate. We probably do one a week.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. And I did witness cremation for both of my parents in Illinois. And I kind of dragged my family along, they weren't so sure about being involved. It sounded scary to them. And afterwards they were all my siblings were so at peace with the fact that we were able to accompany each of our parents as far as we could on the journey. Moving into the retort, pressing the button to close the door, pressing the button to start the flame, and then we sent that was their send off. So if you have, I know some people have an immediate aversion to ooh, why would I want to do that? And I can just attest that it can be a really beautiful healing process, being able to do that.
Yeah, I see families a lot too that are hesitant, but then just do it anyways. And afterwards, they're just like, that is one of the most healing things we could have done. And witness cremations are really special in my heart. I do appreciate
They're
them.
super impactful. I mean, it's just it's a somatic way to care for your person kind of as this final act. And I'll bring something in just from our Jewish ceremonies that I love so much that, any rabbi, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but just something that resonates so much with me is at a Jewish service, for example, there's an opportunity, almost always burial, of course, depending on the type of Jewish that this family might be, but placing the casket into the ground. Afterward, the rabbi invites everybody at that graveside to place essentially a scoop of earth on top of that casket. And the symbolism to that is that this is the only act that we can offer our deceased that they can't reciprocate. And I feel the same way about cremation, having the ability to do that for somebody you love is really this final act of hey, I can do this for you, even though you can't do it for me.
Nice.
And it's super healing. It's super healing.
Oh, we've got some more questions in the chat.
We have an aqua. So so aqua cremation, you'll hear alkaline hydrolysis, water cremation. Those are three very interchangeable terms. I only know of 3 machines that are actually here in Colorado. So it would be something that would be outsourced through In Memoriam. But again, there are not many providers that have that right now. Again, can we offer it? Absolutely. We do not own an alkaline hydrolysis machine. No. Brief statement from an excellent book by British undertaker Rupert Callender in this book, What Remains. Well, I'd love to hear it, Larry. I feel like my husband hates that I'm going to say this, but I started a memoir for my children of all of the bizarre stuff that we see, because we get to a point where we can't even like make it up anymore. So we're like, we'll add it to the book.
Yeah, and this is a book called What Remains by a British fellow, and I've read it with some care. It's a riot, and it's also deeply moving, and it has to do with the business of being an undertaker and also the business of being a human being all at the same time. That sells it a bit short, but it's a fascinating read, and it has to do with how one practices undertaking and how one undertakes to find ways to be helpful to those who are in need and to dare to love. Here's there are 2 paragraphs at the end of the book, What Remains. I'll read the first one. I still fear death, particularly the manner of it, and think about it every day. But with this constant hum of mortality comes the understanding that ordinary people are far from ordinary. Each man and woman is a star. It has taught me that nothing matters apart from love, not status, not achievement, beauty, or intelligence. Love.
Larry, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And
Grain's the publisher, if you care.
Oh my gosh, no, that like resonated so hard with me. I'm like literally crying. Thank you. Yeah, there's something to be said about kind of looking death in the eye every single day. I don't know.
And I think we step into and offer love to members that come in that don't have it from outside perspectives. And we're able to recognize that and give them at least a little bit of love in the end. And I just very much honor our position in the fact that we are giving them their last care.
Yeah, sometimes it's full spa treatment. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, just the dignity side of cleaning somebody up, or knowing that it's the last time that human hands are going to be on somebody, I think is just really impactful. And like it gives me the goosebumps how absolutely like there's a solid balance for me of being transparent but being secretive enough that we keep the sacred of what we do. So finding that balance is just absolutely it's going to be a lifetime of work. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jane, let me get to that one. Person who lives in Colorado is in a car accident out of state. What is the best next step? So in that particular instance, no matter where that person dies, they're going to go to the county that the accident occurred in. So let's say it's in, I mean, I would imagine this is a road trip that went really awry. But let's say it's Nebraska and somebody's in Nebraska. That is up to that family to kind of, this is a big one. So the family could essentially go to Nebraska, see their person there in Nebraska, do arrangements in Nebraska, or you could have a funeral home have the body brought back into Colorado, if that makes more sense for people to come here and say their goodbyes. But unfortunately, with a question of that nature, there's so many variables. Let's say it's a cremation. I mean, the family's now got to weigh their odds. Does it make more sense for us to just have the body cremated out in Nebraska and brought back? I'll use a personal example for this just so that you guys kind of have an understanding. So my husband's brother killed himself a couple years ago down in Mexico. And with the nature of his death, the county that he died in would not let us cremate his body. And that was a rule that was enforced by that particular county in Mexico. And so they had to make the very tough decision to bury his body at a plot in Mexico City that nobody would ever go visit. And that was a very unfortunate circumstance that we just had to deal with. At the time, it was like a punch to the stomach without any other way to explain it. And now moving forward, it makes sense that the county did why they did have to do that. You know, he was under investigation for a very extensive amount of time. And kind of with the time we've come to understand, you know, hey, that's where Manilo's going to be his whole eternity. And, you know, now we just have to make a trip to Mexico City to go see him if that's what we want to do. So, you know, I mean, it's just, there just are so many variables. No question pisses me off more than where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because, oh God, none of us know what next week is, you know? I mean, so trying to plan for this is just it's imperfect. I can't even plan for life. But having the basics answered, you know, at the very least, you know, hey, my husband and I know that no matter what happens, we both want to be cremated. If he wants to see my body, that's up to him. You know, if you want to put me on display at a restaurant and have everyone come in and eat their favorite, that is up to you guys. I love that. Like, take all the curiosity out of it for me. But you know, again, having those little things just kind of addressed is huge. We're huge proponents of talking about it, and talking about it isn't going to make it happen. So
I'm not seeing other questions that you haven't addressed yet. I'm wondering if you might have stories to share of challenging situations that you've been able to resolve, or unusual. I talked to you a week or so ago, and you had two different, very disparate cultural situations that you were dealing with, one right after the other, and you just had to adapt. Anyway, any stories that would be of interest?
oh gosh, I have so many fun stories.
The happiest funeral.
Abby just did what did you do? A shot of whiskey at a
Yes, if they want me involved in that way, I'll be
if
happy
families
to.
want us to take shots of whiskey, we're all for it. If families want us to, I mean, we have so many fun things. I've got to be part of a Baha'i funeral for a family that I knew very well that was actually Catholic. But the daughter-in-law who passed, she had come in and she did her plans with me, and she was Baha'i. Where I've been involved with placing dirt on her grave, she was a natural burial, and just, again, kind of culturally becoming involved with the family at that super intimate time is always just it's so freaking amazing. I mean, it really is. I've cracked a coconut over someone's head with a machete. True story. That was for a Hmong family.
And I think like leaving our expectations out of it is very important too, because obviously you have all your different religions, but families take what resonates with them in that religion as well. So you can't go into it expecting, you know, the Catholic family you served last week is going to be exactly the same as the one.
100%. There are hundreds of different types of Buddhists. And there are hundreds of different types of Christian. I mean, it's just so like ridiculous for us to even assume anything anymore. So we just don't. And we are not agenda pushers whatsoever. We absolutely will not. We will follow the lead. We will educate, we will inform, but we will never push an agenda.
Oh, I see Maya's got her hand up.
Where are you seeing this?
Oh, it's right there.
Oh.
You're
Yeah,
busy talking. I'm perusing here.
Oh, please.
Hi, can I
Hi.
speak now? Oh,
Hey.
hi, I'm 76 and a half years old and I live in Albany, New York. But where my burial plot is about an hour away south of me, where my husband and son are buried there. My question is, I'm getting the idea that a funeral is really for your family and not so much for the person that's being buried. But
Mhm.
I have issues like I don't want to be embalmed, so because that's chemicals and stuff, and I want as natural passing as possible. So my question is, can one have a viewing if you're not going to be embalmed? There's still going to be a viewing, like in a funeral home for the
Absolutely.
family. Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Majority of our viewings are even without it.
Let me say this with a little bit of hesitancy, only because I
Oh.
don't know New York statutes.
Oh,
There may be something different, but speaking for Colorado, there is no legal requirement for the body to ever be embalmed. That is your decision as a family.
Oh.
However, there are certain situations where perhaps an antiquated church may require that the remains be embalmed to bring them onto the premises.
oh.
No one's ever checked that, but just, so you're aware of what questions to ask. I mean, I would ask your funeral home and or indicate to them, hey, it's really important to me that I am not prepared in any chemical manner, that I want to remain as natural as possible. And to answer Andrea's question, no, absolutely not. You do not have to be embalmed to be cremated. There's no reason to be embalmed, period, unless there again are certain circumstances that we've discussed with the family. So embalming really captures three different things for us. It's preservation of the remains. So, if we're looking at an extended amount of time before the burial or before services, we might suggest please do an embalming just because refrigeration can only do so much. Second is sanitation, so making sure that the chemicals are doing their job and taking care of any bacteria or virus. But of course, that is all, again, very circumstantial. And then the third side is presentation. Sometimes people who have been very sick for very long might look better embalmed. I mean, and that's just the reality of the situation. Our role as good funeral directors is to tell a family, hey, I have zero concerns whatsoever about your person staying natural. Embalming came after World War I, when people were needing to get bodies back home for identification purposes. So there was a preservation and a sanitation technique that became about with that. Modern refrigeration now basically is in lieu of embalming.
Right.
Now, again, there are certain situations where maybe we have a body that cannot stop purging. There's already natural processes that are happening.
Oh.
We can't.
Oh, you mean like with the bowel movements or urination, that kind of thing?
To a certain degree. I mean, there's essentially what happens is that bacteria, it's always going to be in our gut. But if we don't get to a person over a certain amount of time, that bacteria starts eating the body. I mean, we are not meant to be around very long after death. But if we can arrest that by having the body refrigerated, then absolutely it would take in lieu of embalming, if that's helpful.
So I have to hire a home in Albany, and then I have to be transported to an hour and a half away where the cemetery is. So I have to hire another home down in that area?
Probably not. I would say the firm that you choose would be the one to take the casket down to the cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I would absolutely encourage you to call them and ask those questions, and they can help you kind of get a game plan together.
See, my family, they're all in different places in New York. They're not all in the same place.
Sure.
So, I guess I would prefer to have the service where my husband and son are buried,
Sure.
in that area, so,
And alternatively, if I may suggest it, Maya, you could always have a funeral home closer to the cemetery that you choose, be the funeral
Right.
provider to pick you up and take you back into
right.
their.
Now, because of Zoom, I don't have to travel. I'm not well enough to travel anymore. I have nerve pain. It's horrible.
Well, I'm so glad that we have that technology. Yeah, I want you to feel comfortable with your provider. They'll answer your questions.
So some funeral homes will meet with you on Zoom, right?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good luck with everything.
And
I want to stay around for about 5 more years at least.
Oh, right. No, totally, girl. You get it. Do what you can.
And Maya, I just encourage you to make those phone calls and
Okay.
figure out your arrangements, and then you'll be done with it and you won't have to worry.
Yes. Yeah, it's on my mind.
Yep. And then, and then that little niggly will be off your shoulder if you get things
Thank
figured
you.
out at a time. We're at 5:30. So I am just going to put in a plug for everybody doing their pre-planning. Regardless of your age or where you're at in life, just to have these conversations, like Kelsi has said over and over again, talk to your family, consider what their needs and wants are and your needs and wants. And you don't have to control the whole thing, but at least get some basics figured out, and perhaps choose your funeral provider so that you can have that in your paperwork and pass that on to your family, and they won't be at a total loss at the time of your death, because it just is, it's so hard on the family to have to make these kinds of decisions often when they haven't had any guidance. And there's also evidence that people spend a lot more money. I don't know if you've seen that, Kelsi, but they'll tend to spend more if they're making the arrangements at the time of need, at the time of the death, because there's this emotional thing going around, well, we should do this and we should do that. And, didn't we? If you have it planned out ahead of time, it'll just be more reasonable, I think.
Absolutely. And you're not making those decisions under duress. You always have the authority to tell somebody, hey, like, can we not, go into the top tier, or, hey, I have a very strict budget. Can we stick with this? I mean, that's your prerogative. Now, I'll say that again, with people coming in having the stigma that, hey, I'm going to take advantage of them. And then ironically, we get taken advantage of as funeral directors. So, I mean, it happens on the other side too. We just all need to be well educated, be a good consumer. I mean, that's what this group is for. You guys are already leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else. So give yourself a little bit of grace for that. But always happy to be a sounding board and talk about some of that stuff.
Well, on behalf of the Funeral Consumer Society and everybody in the room, just really want to thank you both, Kelsi and Abby, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Super helpful, and we're just glad to have funeral providers like you out there.
Thank
Happy
you.
to be here.
And thanks again, Larry. I'm going to totally get that book. I can promise you that much.
Everybody have a good rest of the evening.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Sue. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. I was looking on here to how to do the